Welcome to the Avro Heritage Museum podcast, supported by Museum Development North and Arts Council England.
Hello again, and thank you for listening to this latest episode of our podcast. Mike Fazakerley was a recent visitor to the museum. He had a very successful RAF career, which we will hear all about in due course. But just to give you the outline, Mike joined the RAF cadets in 1967, aged 14, going on to be awarded an RAF scholarship just 1 year later. He won his glider pilot wings in 1969 at RAF Locking, and 2 years later went on a scholarship to fly powered aircraft. Over the period 1972 to 1973, he completed officer training, initial flying training on Chipmunks, and basic flying training on the jet Provost. His advanced flying training was over the period 1973-1974 at RAF Valley on the Folland Gnat. In 1974, he converted to the English Electric Canberra and subsequently served at RAF St Morgan in Cornwall from 1975. And the last part of his RAF career was as an instructor at the Central Flying School, RAF Cranwell. But of course, when he came to the museum, he did have a specific exhibit in mind. His particular interest was English Electric Canberra Whiskey Kilo 118, whose nose section and cockpit are in our storage facility opposite the main museum building. Not surprising, really, as he had spent a long time in his career piloting this very aeroplane. It's one of the 75 Canberras that were built not by its designers, English Electric, but by Avro here at Woodford. But Mike is also passionate about armaments. So before we talked about Canberras and RAF service, my colleague Ray Reeder had got lined up for Mike on their trailers one very famous conventional weapon and two nuclear weapons from different eras. And if you watch the Antiques Roadshow, it was a bit like the section where three different antiques are compared and evaluated, as Mike went down the line and talked about these three different sets of armaments. The weapons that aircraft carried are of particular interest to us at the museum. And that's because military aircraft such as bombers were always designed to meet a clear specification set by the Air Ministry with regard to the load, the type of armament, and the capability of the aircraft to deliver it in a certain way to a specific target distance. So in this sense, the aircraft and the armaments are inextricable. Let's go over now to one of our storage and workshop halls to join Ray and Mike for that interesting exercise.
I've got Mike Fazakerley with me here. Mike's turned up out of getting in touch with the Atomic Weapons Establishment, which is a task I've been trying to do for some time, to get an understanding of parts that we need to complete a particular bomb. And it was quite a long trail, but gladly we have some expert knowledge here from Mike to hopefully guide me in the future when I'm continuing the weapon restorations with the team. And we're stood in front of three weapons in what's called Hall 4 in CAE near our museum. All very impressive. It's not really on show to the public yet, but there will be events and so forth when we can draw them out and give that wow factor. Mike, we're looking at, firstly, a huge weapon. We're very fortunate. I should point out our thanks from the Avro Heritage Museum goes to the Royal Air Force Museums. And it's been a hunt for more than 2.5, nearly 3 years of them donating these weapons to our museum. And why wouldn't you? Because we really want to tell the story of why we built aircraft. It wasn't just we're going to make a plane. We're going to make a plane that can carry these particular weapons for a particular role in the Royal Air Force. So here we go on the Grand Slam, on its dedicated trailer, a massive weapon. What's your first impression on that one, Mike?
It is huge.
Huge.
It is huge, isn't it?
It is huge.
I mean, I personally don't know anything about the Grand Slam, other than its relevance to the atomic weapons program. Because when they were designing the V-bombers, including the Vulcan, the Victor and the Valiant, specifically with the aim of being able to carry the UK's atomic weapons, one of the challenges they had was to decide how big the bomb bay needed to be. Because at that point, the UK didn't have any atomic weapons. They were busy working up towards it. And the decision was taken at an early stage that the bomb bay of the Vulcan, the Victor and that had to be big enough to accommodate a Grand Slam. That was the requirement. And it became the requirement that the UK's first atomic bomb had to be no bigger than the Grand Slam. And that's actually what happened. The Blue Danube.
Correct.
Was the shape of it was actually based on the Grand Slam.
Indeed it was. You can see photographs from the Avro Heritage Museum of the first Vulcan being built with a wooden exercise of a Blue Danube weapon in the back, which is obviously modelled from this magnificent weapon, which only had a short life, really, about 6 months at the end of the Second World War.
Oh, right.
That's when it came in.
Yeah.
They completely stripped down a number of Lancasters without any armaments or anything to carry this rascal, which was released and actually went supersonic, I think, as it was spinning down to the ground.
Yes.
And depending on the target, it could penetrate 20, 30, maybe 40 feet into the ground before it detonated.
Yeah.
And it's been made by the god of bombs, Barnes Wallis.
Yes.
That was one of his designs.
Well, one of the benefits of the atomic weapons program was by using the same basic shape as Grand Slam, then they knew a lot about the aerodynamics already. So it cut down the need for testing and trials somewhat.
Okay, 10 tons of death and destruction. We move down the line now to a very odd-looking weapon. It's actually a casing, and it's the Yellow Sun atomic weapon casing. Tell us about this one.
It is. The first thing you'll notice about the Yellow Sun is that whilst it's about the same diameter as the Grand Slam and therefore the Blue Danube, it has a flat end to it. It didn't have the supersonic nose of the Grand Slam Blue Danube type bomb. And the reason for that was straightforward. They wanted it to fall slower. It created some aerodynamic challenges, but when you were dropping what was aimed at being a 1 megaton weapon, you needed it to drop slower so you could get further away. Hence, it had that flat nose profile. So it turned out to be just a big cylinder with a tail put on the end. You also think at the moment it hasn't got the tail on the end.
It hasn't. We're working.
Yeah. What isn't evident from looking at this is that when Yellow Sun went into service as the Yellow Sun Mark I, the warhead filled that space. Because it was a British warhead. It wasn't, a proper thermonuclear warhead as you'd call it now. It was really a big atomic bomb. But then it was at that time that the Americans started cooperating again on nuclear weapons matters. And the warhead that actually went into the Yellow Sun Mark II was a derivative of a US warhead, which was much, much smaller in terms of diameter. And frankly, it just did not need a casing that size. But it was quicker, cheaper and easier to put the smaller warhead into the big casing than to start again and redesign the whole weapon.
I should point out as well to the listeners that this was a weapon that was introduced to all V-bombers during a certain period of time, from the late 50s into the mid-60s.
Yes.
Yes. I can tell any residents that's near the Avro Museum that all these weapons are inert. They're free from explosives. So there's no risk or danger from living next door to these. So there's your Yellow Sun. Fascinating weapon. Yet again, another donated weapon from the Royal Air Force Museum, which we're grateful for. Yeah,
the Yellow Sun was the only bomb that the RAF deployed that actually had a full 1 megaton yield, which is 1 million tons of TNT.
1 million tons. And what was Hiroshima?
That was 10 kilotons, which was 10,000 tons of explosive power.
Yeah, you didn't have to be too close to the target with this one.
No.
It was almost a country destroyer, wasn't it?
It was certainly a city buster.
Okay, we then move on to another representation of weapons atomic. These are looking far smaller. In fact, I've always thought they look like a torpedo. There are a pair of torpedoes next to them, but those won't be discussed today. But we're now going to ask Mike to discuss the WE-177.
Okay.
Which is a C model here.
Well, I'll come back to that in a minute. It is and it isn't. The WE-177 was conceived in the early 1960s as a tactical nuclear weapon to replace the nuclear weapons that were primarily deployed on the Canberra and to some extent the V-Force, particularly the Valiant. So it was not a city buster like Yellow Sun. This was going after frontline military targets in the main. At the time, at the start of the programme, the politicians had decided that the UK should not deploy tactical weapons with a yield above 10 kilotons. Broadly the same as Hiroshima and Nagasaki. In fact, the Chief of the Defence Staff, a naval admiral, once famously said that he couldn't understand why, if 10 kilotons was enough for Hiroshima and Nagasaki, why the RAF would possibly want more than that. What he didn't understand was, of course, that the RAF were going after different targets and under different circumstances. So they'd be going after armoured formations, underground bunkers, stuff like that. And accuracy in a war situation where you're in a contested environment would probably be less. So the 10 kiloton version that was being developed really wasn't what the RAF wanted, but that was all they were going to get. But what happened then was the replacement for Yellow Sun, which was the American Skybolt missile, suddenly got cancelled. And the whole strategic plan changed. The national deterrent was taken off the Air Force and given to the Navy with Polaris, which left a huge problem, because that meant that from 1963 until the late 60s, the RAF credibility was disappearing, because the idea of high-level bombing with weapons like Yellow Sun was becoming unsustainable.
We're neglecting, if I can just point out, Mike, the Blue Steel.
The Blue Steel.
Which was made by Avro.
It was made by Avro.
It came in 1963.
It did.
A standoff delivery missile.
It did.
Principally for the V-bombers again. We don't have an example, so we can't talk about it.
No.
Sadly, if there's anyone knows one out there, we'd welcome it to this museum with open arms.
There are a small number out there.
There are indeed, but people are holding on to it, saying no.
Yes. But yes, Blue Steel had the same warhead as Yellow Sun. So it had a full 1 megaton warhead. So anyway, post the cancellation of Skybolt, two decisions were made. Regarding the V-Force, the first decision was that I can't remember how many squadrons would be equipped with Skybolt. I think it was 4 Victor squadrons and 2 Vulcan squadrons would be, not with Skybolt, with Blue Steel. And that would carry on in the standoff missile thing. But then another 6 squadrons of Vulcans would go low level with WE-177, but not the original 10 kiloton version. They decided that now this was now a strategic weapon. So they moved forward very quickly with the development of a larger version of WE-177, the B version, with a yield of 450 kilotons. At the time, it was variously described as a near megaton weapon, because it was generally in those days, if it was more than half a megaton, it was called a megaton weapon. But actually, it was a 450 kiloton, but still enough to make your eyes water.
Yes, indeed.
Yeah.
Indeed.
The ones you have here, basically, they were known in the service as the £950 version, which was a bit odd because they were actually just over £1,000. But because the standard £1,000 bomb already had the descriptor for the £1,000 weapon, they called it a £950 weapon to avoid confusion. So these training rounds were the same for the B version and the later C version, which was a 220 kiloton tactical weapon. So they were used by both, and you can tell the difference because these both started out as B training rounds, because you could see the original blue colour.
Okay, yes.
Because they were painted in Oxford blue. But then when everything went over to NATO standard green, they repainted them, but left the serial numbers with the blue background. Yeah. So this one was built in 1966 by Hunting Engineering Limited. And that one was built, can't see it, but I could probably tell you. This was actually built in 73. So this was built when the C version was beginning to come into. They're not twins.
They were born at different times.
And this was built at the Royal Ordnance Factory, Cardiff.
Excellent.
So, yeah, but it's incredible to think, really, that if you look at the size of the Grand Slam over there, which was the Blue Danube,
yes,
which had about a 15 kiloton yield. Yeah, this little baby here had a 450 kiloton yield.
That's progress for you, isn't it?
It progressed in the space of just 10 years.
Mm.
If anybody ever asks you what these were on the side,
we have had them explained as and there's an entrance hatch area here, isn't there, to arm them underneath. They'd be underneath here.
That's where the weapon settings were.
The member would reach up.
What these were for is that on the original design of the A weapon, the warhead was smaller, a little bit smaller. So the wires from the fusing elements at the front to the arming elements here, because the warhead sat here. It was designed to go past the warhead to the arming unit. There was no space. So they had to actually drill holes here and duct the wires through this stuff.
Your favourite weapon, that is.
Well, it's just got, as Richard would say, he said, you've gone down a rabbit hole with this, Mike. You know too much about it. But it's just such a very clever bit of kit.
Thank you for this description of our beloved weapons here.
Yeah.
We've got a little bit more to talk to you on, and I thank you for this section.
That's
Much obliged.
Pleasure.
Thank you to Ray and to Mike for that illuminating conversation. It's a dimension of the museum's work to which we pay a lot of attention to detail, even though for the moment we don't have as much display space as we would like for visitors to regularly see all our armaments. But, as Ray explained, they are wheeled out when we have special events. Please listen out for the next episode in this 3-part package when we reunite Mike with the aircraft that he's spent many flying hours piloting, as well as getting him to reflect on his service career. Please keep listening, but it's bye-bye for now from me, Chris Bezic. Cheerio.
Make sure you follow us in your podcast app to ensure that you don't miss out on future episodes.